In a world shaped by power struggles and ideological battles, a few names stand out, not just for how they ruled, but for whom they dared to confront. While many leaders fall in line with the global status quo, some choose defiance. They challenge the systems, provoke global superpowers, and rewrite the rules of engagement. In this video, we unravel the lives and legacies of 5 of the most controversial figures of modern history. Leaders who didn't just govern their nations, but went head-to-head against the West, shaking the very foundation of geopolitics. Let's begin our journey in the deserts of North Africa. Muammar Gaddafi, the self-proclaimed brother leader of Libya, didn't just take power, he seized it with a bold military coup in 1969, overthrowing King Idris and immediately steering Libya into uncharted territory. Gaddafi saw himself as a revolutionary, not just for his country, but for the entire African continent. He expelled Western military bases, nationalized oil fields, and used Libya's vast energy wealth to fund anti-colonial movements across the globe. In the eyes of the West, Gaddafi was a dangerous wildcard, a sponsor of terrorism, a voice of radicalism, and a destabilizing force. But to others, especially in Africa and the Middle East, he was a symbol of resistance against imperialism. His infamous Green Book promoted a third way between capitalism and communism, advocating a bizarre mix of Islamic socialism and tribal democracy. By the 1980s, he had survived US airstrikes and was blamed for the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103. Yet he remained in power for over 40 years, until 2011, when NATO-backed rebels toppled his regime, and Gaddafi met a violent end, dragged through the streets by his own people. His legacy? A nation in chaos, and a name forever linked with rebellion and ruin. Traveling now to the Caribbean, we arrive in Cuba, where Fidel Castro built a fortress of ideology just 90 miles from American shores. After toppling the US-backed Batista dictatorship in 1959, Castro didn't hesitate. He nationalized industries, expelled American companies, and declared Cuba a socialist republic aligned with the Soviet Union. To Washington, this was an intolerable threat. The result? A failed CIA-backed invasion at the Bay of Pigs, followed by the Cuban Missile Crisis, arguably the closest humanity ever came to nuclear annihilation. Castro became the longest-reigning communist leader in history, outlasting 11 US presidents and hundreds of assassination plots. His fiery speeches condemned capitalism, imperialism, and Western intervention. He sent troops to Angola and Ethiopia, supported Latin American insurgents, and stood as a defiant icon for the global South. Yet his reign wasn't without darkness, oppression of dissent, economic hardship, and the exodus of millions fleeing in search of freedom. Still, for many, Fidel Castro was more than a dictator. He was a revolutionary who dared to defy the Goliath of the West. From the tropics of Cuba to the vast heart of Asia, we encounter a man whose influence shook not only his country, but the entire global order, Mao Zedong, the architect of communist China. In 1949, after years of civil war, Mao declared the birth of the People's Republic of China, defeating the US-supported nationalists and sending them fleeing to Taiwan. Unlike the Soviet Union, Mao carved a uniquely Chinese path, rejecting both Western capitalism and Moscow's control. His great leap forward aimed to industrialize overnight, but ended in one of history's deadliest famines, with tens of millions of lives lost. Undeterred, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution, purging intellectuals and reshaping society through chaos. The West watched in horror as China turned inward, cultivating a cult of personality around Mao that bordered on divine worship. His little red book became gospel, and while Nixon's historic visit in 1972 marked a thaw, Mao remained steadfast in portraying China as a civilizational alternative to the West. He was a visionary to some, a tyrant to others. But his defiance built the foundation of a superpower that continues to shape the 21st century. Next, we shift to the Middle East, where Saddam Hussein rose from obscurity to become one of the most feared leaders of his time. Taking power in Iraq in 1979, Saddam crafted an image of strength and national pride. With brutal tactics, he eliminated rivals and ruled with an iron fist. In the 1980s, the West, particularly the US, covertly supported his war against Iran, a bloody conflict that left over 1 million dead. But alliances shifted. When Saddam invaded Kuwait in 1990, accusing it of stealing Iraqi oil, he crossed a red line. The West responded with overwhelming force in the Gulf War, crushing his army but leaving him in power. Defiant, Saddam painted himself as the new Saladin, a defender of Arab honor against Western aggression. He survived sanctions, bombings, and no-fly zones for over a decade. But after 9/11, the US labeled him a threat, accusing him falsely of harboring weapons of mass destruction. The 2003 invasion ended his regime and eventually his life. His execution was broadcast to the world, but the chaos that followed haunts Iraq to this day. Saddam challenged the West and paid the ultimate price. Finally, we turn to Latin America once more, to Venezuela, where Hugo Chávez emerged as a new kind of leader for the 21st century. A former military officer who led a failed coup in 1992, Chávez returned in 1998 with a new weapon, the ballot box. Elected president, he promised a Bolivarian revolution, aiming to empower the poor and free Latin America from what he called US imperialism. With soaring oil prices, Chávez nationalized industries, poured money into social programs, and rewrote the constitution. But his speeches often made more headlines than his policies. At the United Nations, he called George W. Bush the devil, and at home, he shut down opposition media and concentrated power. He built alliances with leaders like Gaddafi, Castro, and Iran's Ahmadinejad, framing himself as the voice of the oppressed. His critics called him a populist autocrat who ruined Venezuela's economy. His supporters hailed him as a liberator. Chávez died in 2013, but his political movement endures, along with the deep divisions he left behind. These 5 men couldn't be more different in culture, in ideology, or in origin. Yet they share something profound, the will to defy. They stood against the most powerful nations in the world, often at great cost to their countries, their people, and themselves. Were they visionaries who stood for sovereignty and justice, or were they tyrants who hid behind the banner of anti-imperialism to maintain control? And now, we ask you, were these men freedom fighters or dangerous madmen? How should history remember those who challenged the world's most dominant powers? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this kind of deep, raw storytelling about power and politics speaks to you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the stories they don't teach in school. Until next time, stay curious and question everything.